Thank you.
All right. So, in what ways are Medicare and Medicaid connected with each other? As in, that's to say, how does one affect the other?
Okay. I mean, I could pretty much speak until like I'm blue in the face with this one. There's so much codependence on these issues. But I think, um, I think a major way that they are um, interdependent on each other, especially for people who are eligible for Medicare and Medicaid, is it's when they're something called dually eligible, and they qualify, for both Medicare and Medicaid, and then there are these programs for these people called Medicare Savings Plan, and they're state run through Medicaid, and they have eligibility and resource incomes that are dependent. That, like, Medicare is a federal program, Medicaid is more of a state, funded program. So, but each state sets its resource and income level, and they're determined by each state. And there are four types of Medicare savings program, each with different eligibility requirements. These income requirements are usually above the qualifications for Medicaid. Medicaid, I believe, it changes every year. It increases a tiny bit every year, but I believe it's around $850 now. I'd like to say I might be a little off on that number. Apologize, but the four types of programs. One's called the Qualified Medicare Beneficiaries Program, and that helps pay for Medicare's Parts A and B premiums, deductibles, copayments, and insurance. So, in other words, if you have Medicare, most of the time you need a supplemental plan to help pay for. Medicare pays for 80% of your healthcare coverage, and then Medicaid, if you're dually eligible, will pay for the 20%. Then the next. Anyway, yes, I live in New York. There's always noise, including your telephones. The next level is the specified low-income Medicare beneficiaries level, and that helps pay for the Part B premiums only. So your income would be a little higher at that level. Well, let's say I'm just using random numbers because every state is different. So let's say if you're qualified, again, this is hypothetical. If you're qualified for be on Medicare at 850, the QMB program, the first program I just spoke to, let's say you're qualified if your income is 950 or anything anywhere between 850 and 950, and then the specified low income Medicare beneficiary, let's say that's like between 950 and 1050. And then the next program is called Qualifying Individuals, which helps pay for the Part B premiums only as well. And then there's the last level, which is like basically the highest qualifying income level, is called the Qualified Disabled and Working Programs Individual, which helps pay for the Medicare Part A premiums only. And just to make you aware, when you say Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, Medicare Part A, that's hospital coverage. Part B are like your medical doctors. Part A also covers lab tests as well. It's like different parts of Medicare. There are actually four parts of Medicare. There's Part A, which again is the hospital lab work and radiology testing as well. Then the Part B is your medical doctors, any outpatient services at hospitals. Part C is what they call a Medicare Advantage plan. It's Part A and B is traditional Medicare. Part C is the Medicare Savings Plan, where you basically still pay your premiums, but you're basically in a managed program, and there are times where you won't have any deductibles. Any co-payments when you see your doctor, but you are limited to a smaller network of doctors. So usually people get the Medicare Advantage plan or the Part C Medicare when they aren't ill or chronically ill. That they it'll end up costing them a little less, but it's also a gamble at the same time. And then there's the Part D, which pays for your which is your oh my God, prescription drug plan. And that has this, it's depending on the program, it's restricted to. Now, I'm just going to speak to this for a second because there is a Medicaid program called Extra Help when you're in a Medicare savings program that pays for your co-payments and pays for your prescriptions. And basically, if you're at a certain income level, depending on what your income level, that's what this program called Extra Help will cover. And again, this is a Medicaid-funded program, and it does pay for that Part D part of Medicaid. It won't pay for you also will have a premium for Part D, your prescription plan, but Extra Help may or may not cover that as well. But if you enroll in a Medicare savings plan, you'll also automatically get Extra Help, if you're at that level. So you don't even have to apply for it separately. Sometimes people apply for Extra Help separately, and then they find out that they're qualified for a Medicare savings plan. So this isn't like a very well-known program. The people outside, even people I've spoken to who have been on Medicare or Medicaid, they're not familiar that, number one, they might be eligible for both, or number two, that these programs even exist. And basically, to qualify for one of these programs, you have to qualify for Medicare Part A, and that's most people who have worked, through their lives. Now, some people may have never paid into Part B, so at 65, they can become eligible for Part A, but they may have to pay more for Part B because they weren't eligible for it. But most people are eligible. Most working people are eligible for Part A and Part B. But if you do not have Part A, but meet like the first level of the qualified Medicare beneficiary level, your state will will have you do a process to allow you to enroll in Part A. But many states throughout the year, when others can limit, because you can only do this at certain points of the year as well. And again, some states are more lenient and some states aren't. So again, even though we talk about Medicare as a federally funded program, when you bring a Medicare savings plan, even though it has the word Medicare in it, it's funded by Medicaid, so you're going to have to defer to the rules of your state. This is a lot of information, so I recognize that. So, this is, I would encourage whoever is listening to this to look up Medicare savings program for greater detail, because it would definitely help you understand. But just think of it as 4 different levels above the Medicaid qualification. Because if you're qualified for Medicaid alone, when you're under 65, because that's the qualifying age that currently that makes you qualified for, or lets you be qualified for Medicare, you can qualify for one of these programs if you are on Medicare with a disability, as I am. So I do qualify for these programs. It gets a little more tricky as to why and how. I'll get into that in a moment. But let me finish talking about the Medicare supplemental plans. So here's an important note that medical premiums, such as Medicare supplemental plans, can help you qualify, is like what I was saying before, for more extensive Medicare savings plan. For instance, Medicare pays for 80% of your Medicare costs. So most people will buy that 20%, but that comes with its own premium. For example, like let's say my monthly Social Security disability income, let's say, because this isn't me, I'm just being me hypothetically. Let's say my Social Security disability income is $1,300. Now my supplemental plan costs me $350 a month. What Medicaid does is they take the 350, they spend down from the 1300. So all of a sudden you're at the 950 level. So instead of being in the, let's say I would have qualified for the qualifying individual, so they would have paid my Part B premium only. All of a sudden now I'm qualified under the qualified Medicare beneficiary level because my income is I'm paying medical bills because they allow you to spend down through your medical bills, especially through a medical premium such as a supplemental plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
All right, good. There's a lot of information. There's so much information on Extra Help too. Mm-hmm. Extra Help has some resource limits too. Like for instance, I'm trying to reflect here. If you're single, you have a limit of what your resources can be. And if you're married, there's another limit. So let's say, I believe this is a federal thing and not it's not a federal thing. It's a state thing. But let's say from what the notes that I've taken, I apologize if this is a little complicated, but the annual limit for a single person is $18,090 for 2017 for an individual and $24,360 for a married couple living together. So even if your annual income is higher, you may still be able to get some help. Like some examples where you may have a higher income and still qualify for Extra Help include if you or your spouse support other family members who live with you, have earnings from work, or actually live in Alaska or Hawaii. They give you more exemptions. So I just want to make sure. So we talked about like Medicare Savings Plan, the 4 parts of it, and we also talked about how you can automatically be qualified for Extra Help, which helps pay for your Part B Medicare plan. And I just wanted to say something too. Personally, I qualify for Medicare and Medicaid because my income and my Medicare supplemental plan does spend down to the Medicaid limit. Now, you'd think, well, you're paying a Medicare supplemental plan to pay for 20%. Didn't you say that the Medicaid plan, the one of the plans pays for that 20%? Well, yes, it does. But when you qualify through a spend down, let's say because I stopped paying my supplemental plan, my income would go back up to that level, and then obviously I wouldn't qualify for the 20%. So I have to pay for the 20%. In this case, Medicaid becomes a tertiary or a third-party payer. So anything my Medicare and my Medicare supplemental plan wouldn't pay, let's say for like a dentist, or because Medicare does not cover dental, some medications like vitamins, that because Medicare does not, the Part D plan does not cover, but Medicaid will pay for that. And Medicaid will only pay for not any dentists, just certain dentists that participate with Medicaid, which are becoming harder and more difficult to find. So I think I will stop there with that, because I think I've given you a lot of information, and I hope that it isn't too much information.
No, it's perfect because it's critical to understand. Me being a nurse, I kind of already, know what's going on, but it's important for people to go understand because it's going to tie into the next question. So okay. You did a really good job of that. If the AHCA or the American Health Care Act, that new law or bill, that they want to sign into law, if it becomes a law, or if Donald Trump has his way with his budget, as I'm going to be discussing on this episode that you're going to be featured on, what effect will that have on Medicare and Medicaid?
Okay. Well, I mean, there's so many implications, as we know. Now, I I'm going to speak to this as best as I can because number one, the AHCA is not like readily available for review.
Right.
But the budget has come out, and there's like double implications for people on Medicaid. I mean, specifically, I'll speak to Medicaid very briefly because if you are on Medicaid, girl, you're in trouble.
Big trouble. They want to cut it by 47%.
Big trouble. So you must call your reps. You find out who your 2 state senators are and your congressperson, and you call them every day, and you remind them that you are in jeopardy because we are not on Medicaid because because we want to be on Medicaid. We're on Medicaid because we need to be on Medicaid, no matter what your reason is. And it starts with you. It starts with you protecting yourself. And that's one thing that I've learned. I thought voting was enough, but no, calling, and they want to hear from you. They do want to hear from you. And I call, I email, I fax, I Twitter, I do everything. I do everything I can. I try to engage with people. And look, I know there are people that are very chronically ill. I'm chronically ill. There are people that may not, want to speak out. I understand. I just encourage you to speak out for yourself, or if there's somebody listening to this who's a caregiver for someone, I encourage them to speak out because what I'm about to speak about is kind of frightening. But a lot of people don't understand the implications to Medicare. So I'm gonna try to speak with that, if that's all right. I think it'll help put a few things in perspective. But there were 2 organizations that when the first AHCA that came out in March, and they were able to analyze, and these 2 organizations were the Kaiser Family Foundation and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And they identified the AHCA's Medicare's provisions and illustrate the potential impact of the changes. Now, often overlooked, the Affordable Care Act's many Medicare provisions altered both the financing and services of the program, including the closing of the Part D prescription drug, which we refer to as the donut hole, and that's a hole where you actually have to pay everything out of pocket. And getting back to what I was saying about extra help, I am subsidized. I still had to pay co-payments for my drugs, but it's June 1st today, 2017, as we are recording this, from January 1st to June 1st, I would have had to pay about $14,000 out of pocket. If I did not have extra help. I would have paid I take between 20 and 25 medications a week, depending on the month. And this doesn't include my infusions for my Benlysta, which is a medication for my lupus. I actually have to go to the hospital and get that infused, and those infusions cost about between the blood work that I get beforehand, between the care that I get, it ends up costing. This is all outpatient. It costs about $6,000. I'm very popular today too, by the way.
So don't even be worried about that.
So it's a lot of money, and there's no way I would have been. I don't have the resources for it. I don't. I don't have the savings. I've been disabled since 2007. I had, just briefly, three spinal fusion surgeries. They all failed, and then I was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And fortunately, I'm in remission. And then I was diagnosed with lupus. So I basically I call myself a professional patient, and when I'm not speaking about all these Medicare and Medicaid scary issues, but getting back to those, so just so everyone knows where I'm coming from, and you know, this is where my passion comes from to make sure that these programs come to fruition. But getting back to what I was saying about these two programs, again, they are the Kaiser Family Foundation and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. But we're talking about the donut hole. And while the AHCA does not address the two first provisions, it does not eliminate the additional payroll tax. Now, this is something that was noted by the Kaiser Family Foundation. The Medicare Part 8 Trust Fund pays for hospital skilled nursing facilities. We're talking about nursing homes. It's a nice way to say nursing homes. Home health, which is in-home health. These are like outpatient nursing homes where, you're able to keep your loved ones at homes. And for a while after my kidney cancer surgery, when my partner was on a different schedule, I had to have home health care attendant, which is a very humbling experience. But, you have to do what you do for you and your health. So basically, under the current law, Part A is financed primarily through a 2.9% tax on earnings paid by employers and employees, about 1.45% each. And the ACA increased the payroll tax for a minority of taxpayers with relatively higher incomes, those earning about $200,000 for an individual or $250,000 for a couple, by about 0.9 percentage points, so roughly 1%. So both of these foundations identify that the repeal of this tax is significant for the program's financial outlook. I mean, the organizations point to a report from a nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation that this repeal would cut federal revenues by $117 billion between 2017 and 2026. Because only the top 1% earners are subject to this tax, the benefits of the tax cut would go to the highest earning households, but the impact would be felt in Medicare's long-term financing. We're talking a significant amount of money. I mean, such a cut would likely lead to Medicare Part A trust fund to become insolvent 3 years earlier than projected. So the ACA was actually, these are the things, they don't talk about the positive things about the ACA. People think of the ACA as, well, how much do I have to pay to the marketplace? But it's so much more significant than that. But in addition to the tax cut, there would be another significant Medicare impact from the AHCA. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that, well, we know the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, there was no CBO score during the new AHCA. It wasn't released until May 23rd, which was several weeks after it was passed Congress, which is despicable, and that's my opinion.
It's a shared opinion.
But just speaking for myself, yes, it is a shared collective opinion. Payments to hospitals with many uninsured payments is, that Medicare pays a lot of those disproportionate shared hospital payments, but the AHCA leads more people to become uninsured. These Medicare payments would increase by $43 billion over the coming decade. Like the tax cut, this would impact the long-term health of Medicare. People like myself that are duly eligible for Medicare and Medicaid and on SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, are most at risk. As previously stated, the MSP, Medicare Savings Plan, and Extra Help would be greatly at risk to lose its funding because these are the programs funded by Medicaid and allocated by each state. With less funding, both these programs are at great risk, in addition to people on SSD, to losing the only income, a fixed income at that. that will literally defund people who are disabled by taking away some of the most important subsidies, payments for Medicare premiums and prescriptions. They will lose their Medicare and health care. For instance, without my extra help subsidy, as I just stated, I would not have been able to pay for my meds that help me manage my diagnoses on a daily basis. Dismantling the ACA, or as everyone loves to call Obamacare, which they're the same thing, which still kills, sorry, wrong choice of word. It dismays me that nobody realizes that they're the same program. And that you talk about fake news, that's fake news. Would likely mean higher premiums, deductibles, and cost sharing for the 57 million citizens and disabled Americans enrolled in the program. It would also bring back the infamous donut hole in Medicare's prescription drug coverage. I mean, the health reform law made many changes to Medicare. It slowed the growth of payment rates to hospitals and other providers, reduced payments to Medicare Advantage plans, and improved benefits for enrollees. Repealing the ACA would increase Medicare spending by $802 billion over 10 years. And according to estimates by the nonpartisan, I have to emphasize that word, CBO, which those, again, I will say what CBO, when you hear Congressional Budget Office, that is CBO. It's coming from our Congress. It's not coming, it's an independent, nonpartisan council, but it is still coming from our Congress. So as a result, Medicare beneficiaries would pay more. Premiums and deductibles are tied to the growth of federal outlays. So seniors would face higher deductibles and copayments for their Part A, which covers hospital stays, and higher premiums and deductibles for Part B, which pays for doctor visits and other services. The White House estimated that the typical medical beneficiary is paying about $700 less in premium and cost sharing this year because of slower growth and costs. Under the ACA, Medicare enrollees receive free preventative benefits such as screening for breast and colon cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. This provision will disappear under full repeal, completely disappear. So these would become out-of-pocket expenses. And it's hard enough getting somebody or convincing somebody to get a colon screening. So if there was no financial incentive to do it, I feel that would be a double whammy right there. Trust me, it's hard enough to drink that liquid having a colonoscopy. From someone who's had 3 colonoscopies, it's not fun. But if I had to pay for it and do that, I mean, I wouldn't be able to afford to pay for it. I'd still want to get one, but basically, so we're talking about those things that would go away, the donut hole that would go away, and the most important thing is that higher income enrollees, however, would actually see some financial benefit from the repeal. The ACA froze the threshold for Medicare premium surcharge at $85,000 or individuals and for individuals and $170,000 for couples. So more people have become subject to it. The law also added a premium surcharge on drug coverage for wealthier beneficiaries. You know, in other single-payer societies, you know, people understand that everybody pays for everyone, you know, whether they're wealthy, whether they're poor, everybody takes care of everyone. And as I always say to people, we're always one health scare away from being bankrupt. So, you know, I've heard from people that say, well, why should I have to pay for it? I'm not sick. I'm wealthy. Why should I have to pay for other people's health care? Well, you know what? Someday that might be you, because I was somebody who earned over 6 figures a year, and I'm not able to work anymore on a full-time basis because I have to be Peter, the professional patient, and I don't get paid for it. Unless you want to include my Medicare and Social Security disability insurance. And my way of giving back has been to help people in my lupus support meetings, to help them gain access to Social Security disability. Because when you do apply for Social Security disability, There have been surveys that have been done. There are actually 67% at the last survey that I read, actually, of people applying for Social Security disability get denied. I, fortunately, was one of those people who actually got through on my own, which I was very lucky. And then once you get approved for Social Security disability, it's 2 years from that date that you become eligible for Medicare. So you still have to wait another 2 years. There's some instances if you are sick or that are waivers. I don't know the specific illnesses off the top of my head, but let's say kidney failure, that would probably be one of the ways that you wouldn't have to have that 2 year waiting period for Medicare. But just so everyone understands, it's not, somebody had said to me recently, I mean, I don't like to curse, so I'll just say effing. They're not effing entitlements. These are things that we as working people have paid into. Those aren't entitlements. Those are things that you have earned. And we all hope not to use them. We all hope that, we will live a healthy life and we will retire with savings and we will get our Social Security and we will have savings on top of that and we will be able to live a long and comfortable life. But for many of us, it just does not work out that way. And this is our life, and this is what we are faced with. And it's not a choice, and that is not really coming into play when we're talking about the AHCA. We're not numbers, we're flesh and blood, we're people. And it's probably, I feel, a lot of the reasons that a lot of these Congress people who have voted for the AHCA have come extremely under fire, because it is a very personal. There are a lot of things that are very personal decisions, a lot of issues, but this one is personal because it will, without that type of access and subsidies towards healthcare, it will kill a lot of people. And there's no easy way to say that.
Wow, that's deep stuff, Peter. I'm trying to get you to smile again, because that was pretty deep.
I'm speaking from my heart.
Right.
I'm speaking from my heart. Well, unprepared. That was an unprepared script right there. That part was. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, if you have any questions at this point, I really have given you a lot of information. Please stop me at any time.
No, you are doing good. I like having you on autopilot. You are doing phenomenal.
Thank you.
You kind of already touched on the question of how has the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare helped you personally. I didn't know if you wanted to expand upon it or...
Yeah, I really, I mean, I don't think you can reiterate it enough, but, I just stated that, the financial solvency of Medicare is probably the most the ACA has impacted my life. In addition, pre-existing conditions, if it ever came to a time, where I had to have access to another plan because, let's say, Medicare became a private plan and they incorporate pre-existing conditions into it. I mean, I have so many pre-existing conditions, I would never qualify for it because they're going to have different levels, that you'll have, benefit levels that you have to pay and, higher. And I couldn't even pay the first level, which means that my cancer and my lupus and other issues, health issues, which I'm not going to elaborate here, that I do have. I tell this to everybody, I go to my doctor's office with 2 sheets of paper. One has a list of my diagnoses, my medications, and my surgeries on there, and that's one page. And the other one has a list of the 17 doctors I see on a yearly basis, some annually, some semi-annually, some every 3 months, some once a month. I would never be able to afford them, to be quite honest with you. My health is not expected to improve. So by removing pre-existing conditions, it leaves me vulnerable to not being covered by other insurances. The subsidy extra help has continually helped me to access my daily meds, which I need to survive. And lastly, the ACA also removed, and people, this is a very important point, limits on healthcare. So that means there's no limit to how much. I mean, between my kidney cancer surgery, my lupus infusions, my medications, everything, my doctor visits, I mean, I would have hit that maximum. I'm still not sure what that maximum is going to be, but I'm pretty sure that I've hit it at this point. I would have had, if those were in place, I would have hit it. And basically what it means is for someone like myself who's had multiple surgeries, I basically would lose coverage to my health care, as would many others with disabilities and people who live with chronic illness, which there's so many of them. Cancer is like the first thing that comes to mind. Like we're talking about like radiation therapy and chemotherapy and just seeing their doctors and having that continuity of care. You know, I was I'll tell this story quickly, but with cancer, I was very lucky. It was found incidentally, and I basically immediately had to have a partial nephrectomy, which was removal of my right kidney, partial, like a quarter of my right kidney was removed. But going into that surgery, I wasn't sure if I was going to have a full nephrectomy. I didn't know what the extent was going to be. So it was like I went in there not knowing. But for kidney cancer, unless you're at a higher stage, that's the treatment. You know, kidney cancer is very deadly. It's a very aggressive form, and I had the most aggressive form of kidney cancer, and it was found at stage 1. And literally, I had a test about 6 months before that, and there was no kidney cancer. So that's how quickly it grew. So, or it might have been so small or minuscule. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, when I was diagnosed with lupus a few years later, one of the treatments for lupus is actually chemotherapy called methotrexate, which is found to be successful in people who have RA or lupus or a psoriatic arthritis. And I was like, said to my doctor, my rheumatologist, I'm like, damn, I got away with having no chemotherapy for my cancer, but here I am having it for my lupus. And it worked, but unfortunately I had a side effect of having high liver enzymes, which is a side effect from methotrexate. Thank you. And I think I'm doing very well here because with lupus, you get something called lupus fog where your short-term memory is interrupted. So I think I'm doing pretty well here. I'm very proud of myself, I have to say. For all the people listening that have lupus, this isn't the way I always am, but I feel very energized by speaking with this and speaking to you and trying to encourage people. So maybe that's what's helping.
Right, and one of these days I'm going to get you to accept the term of activist one of these days.
Maybe. I call myself a concerned citizen.
Okay, well, I'll compromise with you for right now.
For right now. I think of activists as like, you know, those peaceful protests where you're lying down the street and getting arrested. So, see, for someone like myself, like, I would love to do that, but then I'd worry about losing, like, my coverage from going to jail, you know, honestly. So, otherwise, but I understand why people do things like that. But, that's pretty much what I have to say to that. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it definitely does. I think that we belabored this, but I'll let you personally expound upon it with your personal view, which I'm sure that we share the same thoughts on. But what do you think the plans and values are for of Donald Trump, Paul Ryan, the House Speaker, in quotes, and the GOP? As you can see, I'm not a fan of Paul Ryan, so I'll just leave that there.
Well, I have to say that my mom is. She thinks he's such a nice guy. She wants to like pinch his cheeks, you know. Thinks he's such a nice guy. Um, you know,
Wow. Look, do you see my face? I'm like,
yeah. You know, he has an allure to him. He does come across that way. You know, I don't really have like a personal opinion of Paul Ryan. My only opinion of Paul Ryan is he was skewered by our president, and and he took all that abuse, and it was abuse. And as soon as within a few days, there's that picture of them looking out into Washington from the White House, and it was so like it's like, what do you believe? Do you believe? Was he really mad at him? Was that an act, or is he just such a what's the word? Such a I don't want to say he's so obsequious. There's a good word. He's so obsequious that he just goes along with whoever or whatever's in power because he just salivating. But there are important things that I do need to say about Ryan, because there are things that people aren't aware of. Some people are, some people aren't. But if I am belaboring the point for some of you, I apologize in advance. But this needs to be said.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is a major disconnect right now of what is good for America and how are we going to balance and manage our national debt. I mean, I have a personal issue with a bill being rushed through Congress, especially without knowledge of a CBO score. And we've talked about that enough, so I'm going to say it again, Congressional Budget Office, because people hear CBO score and they're like, what's that? But it is, again, coming from a bipartisan committee within Congress. So most Congress people, after the AHCA, the new one was or the latest one, and don't think if this dies that there won't be another try at it.
Right.
We got to keep killing it till it's killed. But most Congress people that were interviewed before and after the vote, who voted for it and against it, had no idea what the bill entailed. And that speaks volumes alone. I mean, I can't say what's in the heart of Donald Trump, Paul Ryan, or any of the GOP, but their actions, and that's what my grandmother always said, and my mom too, even though she likes Paul Ryan. Actions speak louder than words. And to me, it's heartless that people are angry, terrified, and they're exhausted. I know there are days, and I'm sure there are days when you get exhausted and terrified. I mean, from fighting on a daily basis. I mean, there's no weekends off for us. You and me and other people, your listeners, my Twitter followers, and a lot of my friends, there's no days off. Nobody's taking a vacation for this. People are being, there are nights I've been kept awake by this, frightened, not only for myself, but for other people I know, people who are in worse condition than myself, people in better condition than myself, because they don't know how to stand up for themselves, and they don't know what to do. And I try to keep in the present, and I try to focus on what's now, because if I focused on all this on a daily basis, then I probably would be up every night. But, there's no golf outings for us. I never played golf anyway, I mean, our president takes the weekend off, He's not affected by the ACA repeal. And, I mean, I hear from people all the time on Twitter, and like myself, they don't know what the future entails. And it's based on this information. I mean, things like Planned Parenthood, Meals on Wheels. I mean, you have the Anne Frank house calling out Trump on not, coming out and speaking out on, graves being kicked over. And I mean, Jewish graves, and there's no word. And you have the Anne Frank the Anne Frank Center trolling our president. I mean, does that not speak volumes alone?
Exactly.
But I mean, I can speak, about Paul Ryan because he has been long interested in going after Medicare. Now, this is the part that if you do know this, wonderful, then I will reiterate it for your sake. But if you don't know this is something that you really need to know. Paul Ryan has been interested in addressing some of the, biggest challenges facing the country, including the tax code and entitlement programs. He's a devotee of supply-side economics, reforming Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which are responsible for the majority of federal spending. They are the linchpins of the safety net, but Ryan considers them too expensive. In February of 1999, so we're going backwards now, right? We're going back 18 years. Ryan introduced a resolution that Congress should take action to make Social Security sustainable, and it never received a vote. But for most of Obama's presidency, using his perch as the top Republican on the Budget Committee, Ryan has focused on changing Medicare. So this guy has been salivating at his mouth to change this. His preferred strategy, called quote-unquote premium support, would change Medicare from a single-payer program in which the government pays directly for seniors' health care and disabled people on SSDI to one where beneficiaries could use their government benefits to buy private insurance. And the supporters say it would inject much-needed competition into the healthcare space, leading to lower costs and better coverage, while critics, like myself and other people, respond that this would end Medicare as we know it. Instead of being able to count on basic health care after 65, or if you're disabled and were qualified for Social Security disability, these groups of people would be forced to navigate a maze of insurance options like people do in the Obama and AHCA marketplace. These are people who were told when they hit 65, and people who are disabled were told that they would be taken care of, that depended on that all their life. And when people who couldn't take care of themselves before they hit 65 were told that we will take care of you. They also argue that Medicare is less expensive than private insurance, and that the groups of people would receive substandard care under a premium support system. When Ryan first made the premium support a priority at the beginning of the Obama administration, even his friends in Congress and the Senate believed it was a doomed mission. Everyone thought this was the third rail that was going to kill him. And the former George W. Bush speechwriter and a close friend of Paul Ryan said this. And at first, its outlook seemed bleak. When Ryan included premium support for his budget proposal in fiscal 2011, just 14 Republicans agreed to co-sponsor it, as opposed to the AHCA, which was, I believe, 207. It was 219, 217. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact. It was way more than 14.
Right.
And when Ryan became Mitt Romney's vice presidential nominee, a progressive group ran an ad that depicted Ryan rolling a person in a wheelchair off a cliff. So I will leave it at this. Ryan has been waiting 18 years for this moment. It's what drives him.
Wow, I didn't even know about. Wow, I'll have to look that up
you have to look it up. It's one of the most despicable things I've ever seen.
Wow,
he's not the guy you want. Sorry, Mom.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap this up with the last question, which I can't wait to hear from you because I love you to death already.
Thank you.
If you could speak,
Excuse me, go Yankees.
Go Yankees, go Derek Jeter. If you could speak directly to the Republican Party to repair the ACA instead of replacing it, or if you could just speak to the Republican Party, period, what message would you give them?
Now, is this me testifying before them, or is this just like me calling them up individually? I'm sorry.
This is you having the House floor and you speaking to them, and whatever your message is, what would you give to them? What would you say to them?
Okay. Well, I can't speak to this without bringing Hillary Clinton to this because, unfortunately, with all the fake news that was going on during the campaign, her messages seemed to be drowned out. But what was important is during the couple of debates, love her or hate her, she was very vocal on the ACA. And, you know, we can all agree, and especially people who are in the marketplace, that the ACA is far from perfect. I mean, there are things in the marketplace, there are high premiums, and there are reasons for that, and reasons that I can't really elaborate here, but Paul Ryan has things to do with that as well, and pharmaceutical companies. And, you know, the ACA, as far as Republicans were concerned, it was designed to fail. They wanted it to fail. They wanted it to fail because of the reasons that I previously stated. They wanted not a single payer Medicare system. They wanted to turn it into a private paying system. So, you know, when you have something that's designed to fail, it makes people furious. But even as the ACA is right now, the polls right now are close to 60% of people still want the ACA. Given all of that, given the high premiums, given everything, because it still gives you that access. And people want something they are sure of, not something where they're going to push through without a CBO score. But the two major things that it accomplished, other than increased access for people to healthcare, are raising the age of children being covered. So it went, you know, people up to 26, and not like Trump said when he was interviewed by Leslie Stahl, children living at home. No, these are children that can live anywhere. Right. They were still covered. They didn't have to live at home. They could live anywhere, which made me cringe, but actually, that was the most normal he was after the election. I didn't get fooled, but it was nice to actually see him acting presidential for probably most likely prepared speech. But I don't even want to talk about that right now. But it's besides the point.
Excuse me, sorry.
Yes, Trump. See that perfect timing.
No.
So. With Secretary Clinton's, the two ways it did was raising the healthcare children being covered under the parent, and the other thing that it also accomplished was to get rid of pre-existing conditions. There was also a third way, which I had mentioned earlier, which was getting rid of the limits to how much you were able to be covered under your health care, because there were limits before, and that is such a crucial thing when you are facing a debilitating or a chronic illness. Having to worry, oh my God, am I gonna hit it, now? Because people can spend, millions of dollars on their cancer coverage. That's just the cost of our health care, and it's an unfortunate thing, but it's a realistic thing. But the reason I bring up Secretary Clinton is, she wanted to find, and again, this message was drowned out, and I heard it, and I hope you heard it, and I'm sure other people have heard it, that, there were ideas to make changes to the ACA, to enhance the ACA. The ACA was a foundation that was supposed to be built upon. You start with an idea, it's in place, it's working for people, and then you build that foundation. I mean, the proposed changes in the ACA, right? AHCA would throw these protections out the window, and that there's no compromise here. I mean, it is a nightmare. We were promised things by our current administration. He not only said he would protect Medicare, but he also said he would protect Medicaid. So he's getting rid of Medicaid through the AHCA, but through the budget cuts as well. So the Medicaid is affected twice. And excuse me, I lost my train of thought for a second. We were promised that, the things that we've heard, the AHCA is not an improvement. There is a better way. But it's a way that can't be rushed. Our leader seems to be focused solely on winning and losing. And if I met him, I would let him know there are no winners, there are no losers. But in this instance, there are people that would lose their lives, and there will be blood on your hands, and people will die. I'm pulling my weight.